Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha. Welcome to Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam episode number 55. In this Bhakti Rahasyam, Thirukkolur Penpillai is comparing herself to the strong and unflinching devotion displayed by Draupadi towards her favorite Lord, Shri Krishna. This incident is captured in our great epic Mahabharata. Now, Mahabharata is such an all-encompassing and a comprehensive epic that it is said what is not there in Mahabharata cannot be found anywhere. Apart from the great messages which this great epic has to offer us through the incidents, through the great personalities, there are also a huge range of negative emotions, human emotions which are at interplay, be it jealousy, be it greed, pride, ego, enmity, hyper-competitiveness, name anything, you will find in Mahabharata. That is why it is very important for us to go through this great epic, absorb its contents and see the various learnings and teachings which it offers us for our day-to-day lives. Now, coming back to this Bhakti Rahasyam, we will continue with the story flow and see the Rahasyam statement towards the end. Starting from human emotions at interplay. Now, Duryodhana, the Kaurava prince, wanted Draupadi, the chief queen of Pandavas, to be his wife. He had a special attraction for her even before her marriage to the Pandavas. Now, even after getting married to the Pandavas, his special attraction didn't cease. Now, there were various instances which happened post Draupadi's marriage to the Pandavas, and at certain places it actually was very insulting to Duryodhana. So we will see one such instance. Now, before we get into that incident, the Kauravas always wanted Pandavas to be in exile. They wanted Pandavas to be, say, homeless. So Duryodhana had his eye on the Pandavas' kingdom, their palaces. So in this particular incident, he pays a visit to the Pandavas' kingdom of Indraprastha. Now in Indraprastha there was a fabulous palace. It is mentioned in Mahabharata that that particular palace was a typical architectural wonder even in those days. So Duryodhana wanted to see. In fact, he was burning with jealousy, another human emotion. He didn't want Pandavas to be happy. So when he heard that they were living in one of the magnificent opulent palaces, he wanted to check for himself. So he comes to that palace, and the moment he enters, though he is awestruck, yet the other side of emotion, that is jealousy, starts burning even with a greater rage. Now, speaking of the marvel and the wonder in that palace, Duryodhana happens to come to a spot which looks like a crystal floor. Now, he thinks it's again the product of that architectural wonder. It appears to him as a water body, though it is a crystal floor. So, cautious not to wet his robes, he just lifts his robes to knee length in order to avoid the water. Thinking so, when he steps into that crystal floor, it is not actually a water body, it is a floor. So there are others who are looking towards him and they start laughing because of the foolishness where he has lifted his robes thinking that it's a water body. Now in another instance, at the same time, he comes across another place which looks like a crystal floor to him. So he already has an experience of getting tricked. So he doesn't do anything to the ropes. He thinks that it is just a crystal floor and starts walking forward. The moment he sets his foot on the floor, he actually falls into the water body. So it was actually an in-house lake which was designed in such a way to be a crystal floor. Now he is totally wet. He just comes up and the people around him, they start making fun of him. Now that is too much for the Kaurava king to bear. Among the people who were making fun of him were the Pandavas and Draupadi. She laughs out aloud in presence of all the people there. So this particular incident actually aggravates Duryodhana's negative emotions. He leaves that palace in a very angry mood. So when others were laughing, Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, was careful to take note of Duryodhana's emotions. He in fact tried to tell other people as well to be calm, yet people wanted to have fun at that moment on Duryodhana's foolishness. So this increased the enmity which Duryodhana was harboring in his heart for the Pandavas. Now he goes back thoroughly insulted. His feelings, now negative feelings for Draupadi, increased manifold. He hatches a plan to usurp this palace as well as the entire kingdom from the Pandavas and send them on an exile. He comes back, he consults his uncle Shakuni, and they devise a plan to trick the Pandavas into surrendering their palaces and the kingdom of Indraprastha. Now this is one of the central plots of Mahabharata, where the Kauravas trick the Pandavas in a game of dice, and the rest is history. When the Pandavas come back, they demand their part of the kingdom. That's the Pandavas are sent on exile. They come back, they demand their part of the kingdom. And Duryodhana says that not even a single inch of land would be offered. And then the role of great Sri Krishna, the Mahabharata war, etc. So here we can say that the incident of Duryodhana's insult was kind of one of the triggering points. Now when the plan is hatched for the game of dice, the Pandavas are invited to the Kauravas' kingdom of Hastinapur, where an arena is set for the game of dice. Now the eldest Pandava, Yudhishthira, had a weakness for this game. So he couldn't refuse the offer in spite of seeing through the malicious intent of Duryodhana inviting them for the game of dice. Had he refused, then and there itself, maybe the war may never have taken place, who knows. But he accepts it. He comes to the place. He wants to play with Duryodhana, knowing that he's not so great in the game of dice. But then Shakuni comes in. He says that he will match Yudhishthira and the game starts. Now Shakuni is a great expert in this game of dice. He knows the tricks very well, and with his tricks he starts defeating Yudhishthira. Now Yudhishthira starts losing his possessions one by one. He pledges his jewels, his ornaments, his chariots, the horses, elephants, then his army of soldiers follow. Then, sadly, one by one, his brothers, he starts to pledge them one by one. Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva. And finally, when there is nothing to lose, he pledges himself. Which means now, because of losing this game of dice, these 5 Pandavas have become slaves, or they are bound to follow the instructions of the Kauravas. Now, when Yudhishthira saw these successive losses, he could have stopped then and there and he could have minimized his losses, minimized the damage. Yet, that's how, say, things were destined to go by. He pledges the entire Pandava brothers, and then finally he comes to the point where he has to pledge his wife Draupadi. Now this is the most painful part. And Duryodhana was exactly waiting for this moment where he could cherish his long standing dream. So he immediately orders his brother Dushasana to get Draupadi from the inner chambers either by asking her to come, or if she doesn't budge, by force. Now the evil Dushasana, he goes and grabs Draupadi by her hair, because when the first proposal is put to Draupadi that she has to come to the arena, she refuses. So left with no choice, he drags her by hair and he gets her to the center of the arena. Now this angers everyone present there. It also makes the Pandavas as well as all the elders present there very, very sad. But nobody is able to stand up to Duryodhana or Dushasana. Now, to add fuel to fire, Karna, who is the close friend of Duryodhana, gives a suggestion that Draupadi should be disrobed. Now, this was too much for anyone there to bear. Draupadi was in a state of shock. Now, nobody deserves to be treated in this manner. Nobody. And she was the chief queen of the Pandavas. So, seeing that there was no mighty warrior in that arena who was ready to stand up for her to help her, she quietly turns her mind inwards and starts praying to Lord Krishna, her favorite Lord. So till that point, she was holding one arm, trying to protect her robe from being pulled, because the wicked Dushasana had already started pulling her robe. So she was holding back, seeing here and there who would come to her rescue. But when there was nobody, she let go of both her hands in the air and she says, Govinda Pundarikaksha Rakshamam Sharanagatam, which means, Oh Lord, I surrender to you. Please protect me. Chanting this, she faints. Dushasana tries to pull her robe, but since she has already surrendered to Lord Krishna, she has chanted his name with full faith. Miraculously, as and when Dushasana is pulling her robe, there is a fresh set of robe which clothes her. So this way, Dushasana was trying and trying and trying, yet piles of cloth continued to robe Draupadi. Now, the point had come when Dushasana was fatigued, he was desperate and he fainted out of fatigue, because this was too much for him just to continue pulling the robe. It was kind of he thought it was a workout, and finally he fainted out. Now it is very clear in this incident that the Lord's name was enough to protect a devotee in trying circumstances. The devotee had full faith, had staunch devotion in the Lord, and the Lord responded accordingly. Now, this is the incident which Thirukkolur Penpillai thinks of when she says the Bhakti Rahasyam. Did I raise both my arms up like Draupadi and in a way pray to the Lord, chant His names, had that unflinching devotion that the Lord will protect me from this circumstance? So she was a great devotee for which Thirukkolur Penpillai admires her, and she has framed a Bhakti Rahasyam. Did I raise both the arms like Draupadi? She says this statement to Swami Ramanuja. So that was the content of our Bhakti Rahasyam episode number 55. Plenty of takeaways for us even in this small 15-20 minutes incident from Mahabharata. So think, if one were to read the entire Mahabharata, what all messages would come through. There are lessons for us in our day-to-day lives, that insulting further triggers enmity, like we saw when Duryodhana was insulted in that palace. That was one of the trigger to take revenge. Then we also see that temptation for something, or let us call excess indulgence in something, leads to one's ruin. Like Yudhishthira, he kept on pledging one things after the other, and hence he had to see that particular phase or time in his life just because of his temptation for the game of dice. And lastly, the most important one, have unflinching devotion, have staunch faith in the Lord's names. The Lord's names are enough to protect a devotee when the devotee is put under stress. So that was our current Bhakti Rahasyam. Stay blessed, stay devoted, and stay tuned for our next Bhakti Rahasyam. Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha.